One thing, I made the motion before to take a look at this, and it's to take a look at, because I hesitate a bit. I went out there and I took a look at the lot, and I think it was suggested possibly look at it as a community garden. I don't know whether that's applicable or not. I know there's apple trees on that lot and stuff. So there's that sort of thing. I guess maybe I'd be interested in asking town staff to look at that aspect also while we're going through this process to see if there is a possibility of a community garden, and I think that'd be something to look at also. It is. That's just kind of a suggestion, and it's up to the council.
I'd agree with that.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm interested in making a garden. Maybe a bench and a gazebo and a sitting area or something, but I don't know. Because with a garden comes taking care of it, comes weeding it, comes all the stuff that goes with it. And are we doing that? Are we designating more staff to go do that and take care of that? I'm not interested in that, but.
I thought a community garden. It's a community
It's a
garden. It's
volunteer.
not a staff. Yeah, it's an agreement for people in the community to do it, and then they get their benefits of it. And
We'd still have to put the water in and stuff like
In
that.
my,
But if we own it, we would have to take
in
care
a
of it.
prior position, I established a community garden when I was the manager there. We owned a fairly sizable piece of land, and we provided some utility support, and we provided some initial materials, but then all the maintenance of it was done by volunteers, and they actually would buy a share of the garden. And that didn't give them really a plot. They gave them a share of the garden, and everyone shared in the work, and then shared in the harvest, and the excess harvest was given to the local food bank. This lot
Not that big.
it's not big enough to produce enough to, and the issue that we ran into there also that we had to address was vehicular access and parking, because as you get community members that want to go there, they have to park. So we would be actually exacerbating the parking issue in the neighborhood by doing that. But certainly as open space or whatever the council wants to do, if you elect not to sell the surplus piece of land.
something related to parking. If people are saying that folks are parking in the road, do you have numbers of more accidents in this area than in any other side of town? Do you have any numbers related to?
I don't have that data, Ms. Dozier. I know that our police department does deploy enforcement resources based on data. So if there's a problem with crashes in an area, they deploy the traffic safety unit to try to, they look at the environment, they look at other conditions, but they also look at then just enforcement. So if there was a high incidence of crash in this area, the police would be on it.
And you'd let us know.
If specifically in this location, I'd be happy to let you know. But this is just the normal course of business for the police department. If they based on the crash data they deploy resources. So, but yeah, I can let you know if there have been any crashes at this location.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I've been out there. It seemed like a kind of a slow-mo
Okay.
arena.
Yeah, I still,
There's not a lot of activity.
I'm still against selling the spot and putting a house on it. I mean, I feel like having it as open space, having apple trees on there, having it as green space, to me is more beneficial. But that's my opinion.
To me, go ahead. Were you
I was going to say, related, when we had this discussion, the manager talked about sort of when we own a property, our liability, and if things happen on it. And so I was thinking about that. So I'd like you to address the concern if we do keep it like that, the liability that we have because we own it and things happen on it.
Yeah, that doesn't change from the way it is right now. So we have the liability for it now. We would have the liability if we maintained it. This is just a way to shed liability with a piece of property that we have not defined a public purpose for. So, and that's why I believe that it was my duty to bring this to the council at your last meeting. Say, we've had someone express an interest in a piece of land that we have not identified a public purpose for. So if the council opts to not sell this piece of land, really nothing will change unless we then define a public purpose for it. But yeah, it's entirely up to y'all. We'll obviously do whatever you want to do.
So if we elect to say, okay, let's move forward, can you explain that process again? I mean, because we still have the right to say no here going forward.
Right. So if this resolution is adopted that begins the upset bid process, we'll place a sign on the property. We'll place an ad in the newspaper. It will give other folks 10 days in which to make a bid that is higher than the one submitted, and it's a certain percentage higher than this one. I don't have that data point in my head. They would need to make a deposit for their bid, just as the current bidder has, and then the process starts over again. The 10-day clock runs again, and that process continues until you get a bid and it runs 11 days, or 10 days it expires. At that point, the upset bid process is over. You've received your highest bid. At the council meeting immediately following that, we would come to the council and say, we have received the highest bid in this upset bid process. What is your pleasure?
You were going to say something.
No, to me, it was just how the upset bid program goes, and if it's a certain amount of money, and I'd have to come up with that decision myself, and all of us would, then how can we better use it someplace else and enhance someplace? And maybe we don't want to, but we can go through the process and just say no at the end. That's all. So that's why I originally said, well, let's look.
Okay, so so our vote previously was for us to take a look.
We
And
surplused it.
Yeah.
No, we declared it surplus.
Right.
That was the first one.
Right.
This one is to allow the upset bid process to start.
Okay. Or not.
Or not.
Well, yes. The proposal is that the town manager gave us a resolution to begin the upset bid process. So if we choose to approve that, then the upset bid process starts. But at the end of the upset bid process, which could take weeks, then we'll have a final opportunity to say we'll accept this one or we won't.
Okay.
And how the property gets used depends on its current zoning and whether or not anybody decides to request a new zoning.
So
And if we keep it, one final thought, and if we keep it, we ought to determine what the public use is.
So I would suggest that we start the upset bid process to allow the immediate neighbors a chance to say, hey, look, I want to buy this and acquire this and keep it as is. And then, so that starts the 10-day clock. And then if it comes back to us whenever it does, then we can ultimately decide at that point whether we sell it or not sell it. We're not locking ourselves into anything.
No, it's just an investigative process, basically.
I think I feel differently tonight than I did previously after listening to some of the folks. So, yeah, I'm feeling a little bit differently than I did before when I said I was okay with this, this process. Actually, I want some of those things addressed, I guess.
Well, I guess
I appreciate what you're saying. I'm just,
Yeah,
you're saying. Yeah.
I'll make a motion that we start the upset bid process. Is that the right word?
Yeah, adopt the resolution.
Adopt the
Adopt the resolution.
Yes, sir.
Is there a second?
I'll second it. I think we have the judiciary responsibility to at least take a look. That's my feel on it.
Discussion on the motion to adopt the resolution?
Well, my thoughts haven't changed from the last meeting.
Yeah.
I didn't want to proceed to begin with, so I'm not gonna vote yes now.
Okay. All right, all in favor of the motion to adopt the resolution indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
How many was that? Two. All opposed say no.
No.
3. Okay, so the motion to adopt the resolution fails by a vote of 2 to 3. I guess that leaves it with no further action, right? We don't need a positive action. It just failed. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So, pardon?
I would just like to say, I'd like to direct staff to look at options for this site. It might be appropriate, you know, whether we leave it like it is or just open the door for things to do with it.
Okay. So I will remind everyone that staff did do this and they couldn't come up with one. So I think those of you who wanted to say, let's keep it, owe the town manager some options on what, beyond what we talked about, what you think we'd like to do with it. I think, I personally would be okay with starting the upset bid process because I can't think of a public use for it that is reasonable. And I think if somebody wants to have a tiny house, this is a really fine place to do it. And if a neighbor wants to buy it to be adjacent to it and own control, I think that should be their option as well. And when we've got a piece of property that's surplus, I think we have an obligation to either put it to use or to return it back to a private ownership and then apply those funds and resources to something else that we do have a good use for. But that's where I come down on this.
Well, once I hear that if I hear that, you know, there are folks who want to talk about this, who came up here, a whole bunch of them came up here, if they want to have, you know, a meeting, a workshop, whatever it is, and feel that they've been heard and can figure out this in the middle of the road parking and things like that, that's what I feel bad about, that they weren't aware of this on the agenda previously. And so I made a decision based on that, and so I just want them to be heard. I'm free to change my mind once things have been mitigated, but that's just where I am based on the information that like 4 or 5 people came up here and said they had to go home, go to bed, but to get to work in the morning.
Sure. So we'll look at crash data and we'll look at parking and complaint data to the police department to see what actually has been called in.
Have you documented the discussion or the discussion about the uses and kind of shot them down? I mean, is that been written down somewhere so we could, if we're tasked with to come up with something, do you have a list of why you decided not, other uses were decided not were good, that were not good?
So I checked with the director of water resources about underground utilities. There was nothing that he was concerned about there. Similar with electric, there was nothing that he was concerned about. I checked with Parks and Recreation Director, and because of the size of the parcel, yeah, we can because we own it, we can mow it. We can, you know, right now it's not being mowed by us; it's being maintained by the immediately adjacent neighbor. You know, we could take over the mowing of that. We could put a bench on it. Again, then we'll just have the maintenance of that. So, you know, we'll certainly look at it again if it's the council's wishes that it stays, you know, this piece of surplus property just stays in the town's inventory. We'll either put it to the use that it is today, or we'll define a more intensive public use for it. You know, bench or
Picnic table or something.
picnic table, something which may or may not,
Ever be used.
yeah, ever be used. But that's okay. I mean, you can put a sign on it, say Town of Apex Parks and Recreation, and
My wish is for the folks to be heard, and then we'll go from there. That's what my wish would be.
Yeah, to me, they could be heard during the.
We've had
upset
2 public
process,
hearings.
so that's all.
They were not aware of them.
We've
so
had 2 public hearings.
I'm not gonna argue.
You don't have to argue it. I'm telling you, we had 2 public
I'm
hearings.
not gonna argue, and I think that everyone gets to be
And,
heard.
and by the way,
I
Miss
do.
Glover has been here twice.
and
She's been heard.
I get to be heard and not interrupted too, and I think that's really, you know, unfortunate that it happens a lot to me. So
I'm not so sure how the parking, I mean, you're entitled to obviously your opinion, of course. I'm not sure how the parking issue relates to this specific lot, but I mean, I think the parking issue needs to be addressed for sure, but
And I'm happy, I'm always happy to meet with citizens that have concerns about anything in their neighborhoods.
yeah, no, I appreciate that.
So-
Right, and I'm not the only council member who said no. I said yes the first time, but I'm the one that has to get talked to in this manner. So I really, it's just unfortunate, and I really don't appreciate it, actually.
Sometimes
Well-
they're just so-
I don't,
Well-
no.
You repeated yourself, and we heard you 3 times.
No, I was trying to, let's not do this, because I think that's really not good. I don't,
All right, we've finished this. We'll now take a motion to go into closed session.
I'll make
So
a
moved.
motion.
All right, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. All right, we're going to closed session.